a place of mystery and wonder. These ancient caves, formed thousands of years ago, have witnessed the ebb and flow of time, silently preserving the secrets of the past.
For decades, history insisted the first humans arrived in the Americas far later than anyone dared question. Then, inside a remote Oregon cave, archaeologists uncovered evidence that refused to fit the official story. The discovery was tested again and again, yet the results only deepened the mystery. Some researchers saw a breakthrough. Others saw a challenge to everything they had taught for generations. As debate spread and old theories came under pressure, one unsettling question refused to disappear. What exactly was found in Oregon that changed human origins forever? Discovery that defied every timeline. Deep inside Oregon's Paisley Caves, a discovery emerged that would force archaeologists to confront a possibility many believed had already been settled. The caves, located in a dry and remote part of south-central Oregon, had been known to researchers for years. Yet for decades, nobody realized that something hidden beneath the cave floor could challenge one of the most accepted stories in American prehistory. What initially appeared to be an ordinary specimen recovered from the dirt did not look like the kind of object capable of changing history. There were no elaborate tools, no remarkable artifacts, and nothing that immediately suggested a groundbreaking discovery. But appearances can be deceptive. When scientists sent the material for laboratory analysis, they expected results that would fit comfortably within established timelines. Instead, the first dating results produced a number that seemed impossible. According to long-standing archaeological models, humans were not supposed to have been present in North America that early. The result conflicted directly with decades of accepted research. Faced with such an unexpected outcome, the researchers did not celebrate. They questioned it. The possibility of contamination immediately became a concern. Laboratory mistakes, environmental interference, and sample errors all had to be considered. Extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence, and nobody wanted to conclude a single test. The sample was examined again, new material was selected, different procedures were used. The dating process was repeated to eliminate every reasonable source of error that could explain the surprising result. Yet each attempt produced the same troubling conclusion. Instead of moving closer to the accepted timeline, every new analysis reinforced the original finding. The evidence consistently appeared older than expected. What began as a strange laboratory result slowly transformed into a growing scientific problem. Researchers found themselves confronting data that refused to cooperate with conventional explanations. The more they tested, the more difficult it became to dismiss. As word of the results spread among specialists, curiosity mixed with caution. Some researchers wondered whether the discovery represented an overlooked chapter of human history. Others remained skeptical, arguing that unusual findings had to be examined from every possible angle before rewriting established narratives. The debate was not simply about a date. It was about the reliability of a historical framework that had shaped archaeological thinking for generations. Inside those quiet Oregon caves, a mystery was beginning to take shape. The specimen itself seemed unremarkable, yet the information hidden within it carried implications far beyond the cave walls. If the results were accurate, then the accepted story of when humans first reached North America might be incomplete. And if one small discovery could challenge such a powerful assumption, researchers were left wondering what else might still be buried beneath the earth, waiting to be found. But what happens when every test refuses to disagree with a result no one believed possible? How far can science stretch before reality breaks? And what if the past is nothing like we assumed? Stay with us. Genetic clues buried in darkness. The discovery inside Oregon's Paisley Caves was already raising difficult questions, but the real shock arrived when scientists looked beyond the dating results and focused on what the material actually contained. Finding ancient evidence is one thing. Proving exactly who left it behind is something entirely different. For years, archaeologists had debated early sites across North America because stone tools and other artifacts could often be interpreted in different ways. A shaped stone might suggest human activity, but critics could still challenge its origin, age, or meaning. What researchers uncovered in Paisley was far harder to explain away. Preserved by the cave's dry environment, the material contained something remarkably rare. Hidden within it was ancient human DNA. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. This was no longer a debate centered on tools, bones, or indirect traces of human presence. Scientists were now examining genetic material left behind by actual people who had once occupied the cave thousands of years ago. The implications were enormous. Before any conclusions could be drawn, researchers followed strict verification procedures. Samples were carefully analyzed to rule out contamination. Laboratories examined the genetic material repeatedly, knowing that any mistake would immediately undermine the discovery. The stakes were high because the findings challenged assumptions that had shaped archaeological thinking for decades. Every stage of testing had to withstand intense scrutiny. As the results accumulated, a remarkable pattern emerged. The mitochondrial DNA recovered from the samples matched Native American founding haplogroups, specifically A2 and B2. These genetic lineages are associated with the ancestors of indigenous peoples living in the Americas today. That connection transformed the discovery from an isolated scientific puzzle into something much more significant. The people linked to the cave were not an unknown population that disappeared without a trace. They were connected to real human lineages that continued across generations. For many researchers, this made the evidence especially powerful. Stone tools can be disputed, dating methods can be questioned, interpretations can change. Human DNA, however, provides a direct biological link to the people who once occupied a location. It creates a level of certainty that is far more difficult to dismiss. The discovery did not merely suggest that humans had been present earlier than expected. It tied those ancient occupants directly to the broader story of human settlement in the Americas. Still, not everyone was ready to accept the wider implications. Some researchers urged caution, arguing that extraordinary findings require extensive examination. Others saw the evidence as a major turning point. If the dates were accurate and the genetic results held up under continued scrutiny, then migration timelines might need serious reconsideration. Deep inside a little-known Oregon cave, researchers were beginning to realize that they had uncovered more than ancient DNA. They had uncovered a challenge to one of history's most enduring narratives. And then the impossible question emerges. What happens when ancient DNA is no longer just evidence but identity? Who does it truly belong to, and what secrets could it rewrite about human migration across continents? Keep watching. The Theory Under Growing Pressure. For generations, one explanation stood above all others in the story of how humans first entered the Americas. It appeared in textbooks, documentaries, classrooms, and scientific papers. Known as the Clovis first model, it argued that the continent's earliest inhabitants arrived around 13,000 years ago by crossing a land bridge that once connected Asia and Alaska during the last ice age. From there, they supposedly moved south through an ice-free corridor and spread across North America. The theory was neat, organized, and widely accepted. For decades, it was treated less as a hypothesis and more as an established fact. That confidence began to weaken when the evidence from Oregon refused to fit within the traditional timeline. The discoveries from Paisley Caves were not just slightly older than expected. They appeared to push human presence in North America back more than 1,000 years before the arrival of the Clovis people. That difference might sound small on paper, but in archaeology, it represented a major challenge to one of the field's most influential ideas. The deeper researchers examined the findings, the harder they became to ignore. The dating results remained consistent. The genetic evidence remained intact. Together, they painted a picture that did not align with the long-accepted migration story. If people were already living in Oregon before the Clovis culture emerged, then the Clovis people could not have been the first inhabitants of the continent. A theory that had shaped archaeological thinking for most of the 20th century suddenly faced an uncomfortable test. Not everyone welcomed that possibility. The Clovis first model had dominated research for decades because it was supported by significant archaeological discoveries and had become deeply embedded in scientific thinking. Many careers, studies, and interpretations had been built around it. As a result, the Oregon findings sparked intense debate. Some researchers viewed the evidence as a breakthrough that finally exposed weaknesses in the traditional model. Others urged caution, arguing that extraordinary claims required extraordinary proof and that accepted history should not be abandoned too quickly. Behind the scientific discussions was a growing sense of tension. The debate was no longer focused only on one cave in Oregon. It was becoming a broader argument about how science responds when new evidence challenges old assumptions. Every new analysis seemed to strengthen the case that something important had been overlooked. At the same time, critics continued searching for alternative explanations that might preserve the existing timeline. Then another realization began to emerge. Paisley Caves might not be an isolated discovery at all. Researchers were starting to notice similar signs appearing elsewhere, scattered across different parts of North America. If Oregon was only one piece of a much larger puzzle, then the challenge facing conventional history was far greater than anyone had first imagined. What started as a single discovery was beginning to look like the opening chapter of a much larger reckoning. If the Oregon dates are right, what happens to everything we believed about human migration, and who decides what gets rewritten next? Could entire timelines collapse under pressure, and what evidence is still being hidden now? Let's find out. Evidence emerging across the continent. What made the discoveries in Oregon so unsettling was not only what they revealed, but what began to unfold once researchers expanded their focus beyond the state. At first, Paisley Caves seemed like an isolated anomaly, an unusual site that quietly challenged long-accepted ideas about when humans first arrived in North America. But as scientists compared findings from other regions, a far more troubling pattern began to emerge. Similar questions were surfacing in distant locations, often supported by entirely different types of evidence. What once looked like a single contradiction to the traditional timeline was starting to resemble something much larger and harder to dismiss. One of the closest parallels was discovered within Oregon itself. Roughly 70 miles from Paisley Caves, archaeologists were working at Rimrock Draw Rock Shelter near Riley under the direction of University of Oregon archaeologist Dr. Patrick O'Grady. There, researchers uncovered artifacts buried beneath volcanic ash from a known Mount St. Helens eruption. Because the ash layer had a well-established age, it served as a natural chronological marker. Anything beneath it had to be older. As excavations progressed, the findings became increasingly difficult to ignore. Stone tools were recovered alongside fragments of Ice Age animals, including ancient camel and bison species that had disappeared thousands of years ago. Preliminary dating suggested some remains could be more than 21,000 years old. The positioning of these artifacts beneath the ash layer raised serious questions about how early humans may have reached the region. Like Paisley Caves, Rimrock Draw appeared to push human presence in North America far earlier than many experts had once believed possible. The debate intensified further with discoveries hundreds of miles away at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Here, researchers identified fossilized human footprints preserved in ancient lake sediments. Unlike tools or fragments, these were direct impressions left by human movement across an Ice Age landscape. Multiple dating methods, including plant seeds, pollen, and organic sediment, consistently placed the tracks between roughly 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. As these separate discoveries accumulated, an uneasy pattern began to form. Different sites, different teams, different methods, yet all pointing in the same general direction. None relied on a single line of evidence. Instead, they reinforced each other across independent investigations. Still, disagreement persisted. Some researchers urged caution, arguing that extraordinary claims required extraordinary proof. Others felt the consistency across sites could no longer be ignored. The focus was no longer one cave or one region, but a widening possibility that the accepted narrative of the first Americans might be missing entire chapters still waiting to be uncovered. Across North America, something begins to align. Are these sites connected, or is it a coincidence? Could White Sands and Rimrock Draw be pieces of one hidden timeline? And what happens when the pattern fully emerges? Stay glued, a journey beyond frozen corridors. As discoveries from Oregon and other sites continued to challenge traditional timelines, archaeologists were forced to confront a difficult question. If people were living in North America far earlier than the Clovis first model suggested, how did they arrive? For decades, the dominant explanation focused on a land bridge called Beringia. During the last ice age, lower sea levels connected Asia and Alaska, allowing human groups to enter North America and later move south through an ice-free corridor. The theory was clear, structured, and long accepted as the standard explanation. However, newly emerging evidence began to strain its limits. The main issue was timing. Sites such as Paisley Caves, Rimrock Draw, and White Sands produced dates that suggested human presence in North America earlier than the inland migration route was fully usable. If these findings were correct, then people must have reached the continent before the traditional pathway could explain. This contradiction pushed researchers to consider alternative possibilities that were once dismissed. Gradually, attention shifted toward the Pacific coastline. Instead of a single inland movement, some researchers proposed that early populations may have traveled along the edges of the Pacific Ocean. This coastal migration model suggested that groups could have used rich marine environments, fish, shellfish, seabirds, and marine mammals, as steady food sources while moving gradually across vast distances over generations. At first, this idea seemed ambitious, but growing evidence from global archaeology supported the possibility that early humans were more capable of seafaring than previously believed. Island settlements with no land bridges to continents indicated that ancient populations had crossed open water long before recorded history, challenging assumptions about their technological limits. Researchers also identified similarities in stone tool traditions across regions surrounding the Pacific. Certain technologies in Asia appeared loosely comparable to those found in the Americas. While not proof of direct migration, these patterns suggested possible cultural connections or shared adaptations. Combined with genetic research showing complex migration histories, the overall picture became harder to explain with a single route. Oregon became especially significant in this debate. Positioned along the Pacific edge of North America, it lay directly along any possible coastal migration pathway. Sites like Paisley Caves were no longer viewed as isolated anomalies, but potential pieces of a much larger trans-Pacific story. Although the theory remains debated and many questions are still unresolved, each new discovery increases the possibility that the first Americans did not follow one simple route, but multiple, complex journeys across land and sea. Could the first Americans have followed a hidden coastal highway across the Pacific, navigating unknown waters? What evidence has been overlooked in Oregon, and who might have first uncovered the truth that changes everything forever? Stay tuned. The mystery behind Oregon's legacy. The discovery at Oregon's Paisley Caves had already challenged accepted timelines, but a deeper realization was beginning to emerge. Researchers initially focused on the age of the evidence, asking whether humans had reached North America earlier than previously believed. Yet as the genetic data and archaeological findings were examined, another possibility slowly took shape. The cave might not simply reveal an earlier arrival date. It might point toward a far more complicated story of migration. For decades, many discussions about the first Americans centered on a single founding movement into the continent. The evidence emerging from Paisley Caves, however, seemed increasingly difficult to fit within such a straightforward framework. The ancient DNA connected the cave's occupants to Native American founding lineages, but it did not automatically explain how every population arrived or whether all groups followed the same route. Instead, the discovery opened the door to new questions that scientists were only beginning to explore. As researchers compared findings from Oregon with discoveries elsewhere, emerging migration models became more complex. Some studies suggested that the peoples of the Americas may have involved multiple movements, occurring at different times and possibly along different pathways. Coastal migration theories gained attention, while other researchers continued examining inland routes. The debate was no longer about choosing between one explanation and another. It was about determining whether human history on the continent had been oversimplified from the beginning. Not everyone interpreted the evidence in the same way. Skeptics argued that caution remained essential. They noted that archaeology often advances through careful testing rather than dramatic conclusions. Important questions still remained unanswered. Many coastal sites from the Ice Age now lie beneath rising seas, making direct evidence difficult to recover. Genetic data can reveal connections, but it cannot always provide a complete map of every journey taken thousands of years ago. These limitations meant that certainty remained elusive. Even so, the significance of Paisley Caves continued to grow. What once appeared to be an isolated discovery increasingly looked like part of a broader pattern stretching across North America. The site was no longer important only because of its age. It mattered because it encouraged researchers to rethink assumptions that had guided generations of scholarship. Each new analysis seemed to reveal how much remained unknown. The greatest surprise was not that the Oregon evidence challenged an old paradigm. It was that the discovery hinted at possibilities beyond the original debate. Rather than asking only when the first people arrived, scientists were increasingly asking who they were, how many groups may have been involved, and whether different populations contributed to the story in ways not yet fully understood. The answers remain uncertain, but the cave in Oregon has transformed a settled narrative into an open investigation. And somewhere beyond the evidence already uncovered, the next clue may wait. So, what do you think? Could the discoveries in Oregon prove human history in the Americas began far earlier than we were taught? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.